can be found. Yeah, Winnipeg alternative, a flickering light, cutting through the darkness, searching for what's right. On the prairies wide, the wind carries the seed of a truth that's growing, a different kind of creed.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Prairie Truth. Good to be back. We didn't do Prairie Truth last week. Instead, we went a very different direction for the 40th Parallel broadcast. Hope you guys all caught that. Jaron Campanella talked about NASA, space, Antarctica, and so on and so forth. That was neat stuff. We're gonna have him back again. But tonight we have on a returning guest that, amazingly enough, is now once again a major returning guest on InfoWars. We're talking about, of course, the flagship platform of everything independent media. That being, yes, InfoWars. The reason why this broadcast and any other broadcast exists. Yeah, InfoWars. Leo Zagami. Back with us finally again. It's been a while. And there's so much to talk about. There's been a new book out. This man is an absolute key historian, author, podcaster. So we are so excited to have him here with us tonight. But of course, before we get into it, let's make sure to go through out our quick little heads up to our wonderful sponsors at Bulldog Demolition. If you want any kind of demolition done, indoor, outdoor, commercial, residential, well, look no further than.
Got a problem, walls are crumbling down. Concrete cracked, the sorry sight in town. Don't you fret, don't you despair. Bulldogs here, we know the care. Dust and rubble, that's our game. We build strong and make no shame. Call a bulldog, it's alright. We'll redecorate your life. From the ashes to the light, building dreams all through the night. Nails and hammers in our hands, crafty.
All right, everybody. And of course, if you also do want to help out yourselves as well, too, to everything that we're going to be doing this summer, everything that we are already doing. E-transfer, simple e-transfer to winnipegaltmedia@gmail.com. It's a simple e-transfer to winnipegaltmedia@gmail.com. All right. Now, without further ado, of course, let's bring on our wonderful guest here for the night, Leo. Man, it's good to have you back. It comes at such an important time. How are you?
Always a pleasure. And of course, a critical time in the history of mankind, and a critical time for Canada, which has been a stronghold of the Jesuits since it was actually called New France back in the day.
Yeah, that's a funny thing, right? And I guess, and it's funny that you kick things off with that, because really, I've been involved in that conversation for so many years, not as many as you, obviously, but yeah, I know that, it's not necessarily too surprising where Canada finds itself right now because of what you just said. Exactly. There is a lot of truth to that, and we'll work our way up to that. But, let's, as we kind of have to do just to get things kicked off, if anybody out there watching this right now doesn't watch InfoWars or hasn't been here the last several times that we've had Leo on with us, then Leo, give us just a quick little breakdown, a quick little intro on, who you are and where you're coming from.
Well, for those who don't know me, I'm an author and an investigative journalist who is now naturalized American. Since last year, I gave up on my European citizenship after being persecuted in Europe. I had to flee Italy, my native country, in 2019. And earlier on, of course, my work exposing my own involvement with the New World Order started on the internet in 2006, and that ended up with an accusation of espionage initially in Norway. Then I had to go back to Italy, but then in Italy, once I started publishing my Confessions of an Illuminati, things started to get a little bit out of hand. And of course, the Vatican never wanted me to publish these books, as I also repeated in volume 12, which is, as you know, my last installment. This is going to be the last book of the Illuminati Confession series, of the Confessions of an Illuminati, which has been basically something I've been working on since 2005, 2006. I ended up initially with a blog on the internet, but when I saw the level of censorship materializing already back then, there was censorship on the internet, and I thought, I need to go and get some books done. And so that's where I started in Japan, out of all places, thanks to a Canadian journalist who lived in Japan called Benjamin Fulford, who used to work for Forbes. We started a collaboration. Then later on, I collaborated with Kaoru Nakamaru, and I published my first books in Japan. But the Vatican was quite happy just to have them in Japan. And so they offered me money not to publish them in the Western world. They offered me a position as a Grand Master of one of their orders. And in the end, I instead came out with volume 1 in the Italian language in 2012, which became a bestseller. Soon after, volume 2 and volume 3 followed, but that was enough to upset the system. And so at the end, I had to, like I said, after a few volumes of my confessions published with various publishers in various countries, I eventually came here to America, because America, as you know, has a great First Amendment that gives us the possibility to write and to express ourselves in a way that no other country does. That's why just a couple of days ago, and it was the 28th of May, so just a few days ago, we saw what Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, stated publicly regarding the fact that there has been a lot of censorship, and that he is declaring war with the current administration on censorship, because Marco Rubio, of course, knows what is happening in Europe, and he's imposing new visa restrictions on those foreign nationals deemed responsible for censorship or protected expression here in the United States. So as American citizens, we will no longer be censored anywhere in the world, because America is going to start imposing sanctions on such people. And that means also my former country of Italy, which I was brought up to, and I started my activity, but demonstrated a complete defiance towards what is the true freedom of expression. And that is because, of course, they are controlled by the Jesuits in Europe, just as you are controlled by the Jesuits in Canada. Canada, very similar to Europe in regards to censorship, and also in the political mess they find themselves with somebody who Mark Carney.
Just to make a point on that, something that we've reported on here in Winnipeg here as Winnipeg Alternative Media, very much akin to what we see happening in Europe. We just recently had one of our first innocent citizens arrested for hate speech online, and thrown in jail.
That is terrible. That is what happened to me in Italy, where they actually broke down, simply for posting something. They will broke down the door of my home with the police, dragging me out, or threatening me at all times of the day and night. That is the nightmare you are in when you have no real democracy, no real freedom of speech. Now, America is a constitutional republic, but it has a great constitution which under the First Amendment guarantees you this freedom. So what I'm doing now actually is to write a letter which I prepared and I'm sending to the American ambassador in Rome. In the next few days he's going to receive it, and I decided to write this letter to appeal to the fact that Marco Rubio, but also, as you know, before him, J.D. Vance in Munich have denounced the censorship that we have currently in Europe. He challenged our European allies. They seem to be all, it's just like Canada, they're all very, why they're challenging us? The Americans are challenging us. Well, if you do things like the one you just pointed out and just throw people in jail for supposedly some kind of hate speech, you are not reflecting the Western values of really having a public discussions about everything. Not that as soon as you bring up a topic that is not of their liking, they censor you, but more than censor you nowadays, they come and break into your home, they arrest you, they lock you up, they create all kinds of problems for you. In Italy, for example, it's very typical to have what they are known as the SLAPs, which are strategic lawsuits against public participation, because they have a criminal defamation law which is used to silence journalists and anybody that says too much, meaning that while here in the United States we have libel written and slander spoken, which is generally treated as a civil offense, meaning that you can't sue for damages, but you can't get a person arrested for what he says. I don't know how it is in Canada because I have no clue, so you will have to update me on that, Todd. But here in America, it is a civil matter. It seems like from what you are saying with these hate laws, it's no longer a civil matter, it's a criminal matter.
Yes, it is, of course, as we kind of started off this this conversation with, it is moving quickly to what we have seen now in multiple European countries, where we know, what is it, in Germany, in Switzerland, in the UK. You can have the police knocking on your door because of something that you mentioned on social media, like, that day, or at least the day before. And it can be that fast, it can be that volatile. As predicted, literally, as predicted. And it sounds like you were kind of predicting it as well there too. That's where we're moving. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that the similarities that we see between Europe and the places like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, which, as you know, are all part of the British Commonwealth, are because even Great Britain itself has exercised an increased level of censorship, which is unheard before in we seem to have had a little interruption there. I hope that the censorship is not coming in on your side. In any case, Canada's future is definitely, like somebody suggesting in the chat, precarious, because Carney is simply a creature of the World Economic Forum, like Justin Trudeau, and the Canadians have been very quickly to react to all the mainstream BS that was pushed their way, their psyop that, demonized Donald Trump in order to then go and vote once again liberal. So the problem here is in regards to Canada, but also Europe, that we will have more and more a lack of freedom of speech. And we have seen what kind of...
I want to make sure to mention this right now as well, too, because it seems like there's a good chance we might pass this over. I really want to hear your take on this, and it's just very much included in what you're already saying. So I'm not trying to interrupt you or giving you the chance. No. I think I'm just trying to add a little bit onto what you're already sort of going to break down for us. we just recently had, the king, the king from Europe, the king from London, the king from Europe, the old king that we're supposed to, kind of in the same vein as the U.S., kind of like not really want to have too much to do with. But because now we got Mark Carney and another liberal government again.
Which used to be the head of the Bank of England after being the head of the Bank of Canada. Did that means that he was clearly a Freemason of a high level, because not only being, studying in Oxford and also being initiated in certain very elite circles, but also having the possibility of being the governor of both the Bank of Canada, which of course for a Canadian is pretty okay, I guess, for somebody who has studied economics, but also his position of governor of the Bank of England between 2013 and 2020. Now, for that kind of position, you need to be in some very exclusive setups also in good old England.
Yeah, yes, 100%. And I'm going to put that up on screen right now. Okay, so I guess really, and I get this, and you're entirely correct. No big surprise to go ahead and he doesn't want to have anything to do with, the first throne speech after he gets elected. No, he wants to bring in his old buddy who made sure that even though he was probably breaking lots of laws over there in the UK, because a lot of people in the UK very much did not like Mark Carney. Not somebody that they really cared to keep around, but I'm sure some others did, and I'm sure they love his new position here in Canada. So what does he do? He gets his old buddies to come here and do the throne speech, that being the royals. Like that is, here's us right now, mired in this whole thing about like trying to go find equilibrium with the U.S. and inviting the royals to come in and do a throne speech is probably the worst thing you could do, especially with the current president of the United States, Trump. Is it like, these are the ones that we like right now? Like, my gosh, what's your take on that?
I think that Carney has, first of all, been somebody from the system who, of course, wanted to modernize in a way also the Bank of England. The Bank of England, as you know, sits at the very start of a series of innovations like Isaac Newton himself has teached in regard, for example, to the recognition of gold as a as a certain value. But in regards to this guy, because I remember before we went on the air,
I'm sure he thinks that gold has no value unless it's in some place that he's keeping it. I'm sure.
Well, no, I mean, in regards to Isaac Newton, I mean, his contribution was, the person, he wanted to turn metals into gold, but then he also established the gold standards in Great Britain, which I think it is a moment of great importance. Nowadays, we have, of course, another moment of transformation in the current markets, banking systems, and so on, because we have cryptocurrency, we have the arrival of the digital currency, which they are trying to implement in order to make everything even more volatile for those like us who want to have a freedom of speech of some kind. So the CDB digital currency issued by a central bank, it seems to be one of the main projects in the Bank of England that, of course, Carney himself was already part of when during his time, because that's when they started to develop it.
Was it like a signal to the world to go have a royal give his first sort of like a speech from the throne?
To have
over the king.
To have Carl there, to have King Charles, sorry, I call him Carlo all'Italian, in the Italian way. King Charles, first of all, is a relative, because I'm from the Lion family, which is a topic I touch briefly in this book also, the Lion family of the Castle of Glamis in Scotland, which has a long tradition with Freemasonry, with the Templars, and so on. And of course, his position as king, King Charles is the sovereign not only of England, of Great Britain, of the United Kingdom, so Scotland, but is also let's not forget the sovereign of Canada. But this is something that, as you know, people tend to minimize these days, where the monarchy is not particularly relevant in their day-to-day life. However, because of the let's call them attacks, or let's call them the proposal of Trump, I think that the arrival of King Charles was studied in a way that that Trump backed off a little bit from the idea of wanting Canada. King Charles III is somebody whose family, of course, has a long tradition, and so His Majesty is also His Majesty in Canada. It's not only His Majesty in Canada hasn't participated to the 1776 revolution, and that's it. So yes, a surprise, but not a surprise when you started to discuss the sovereignty of Canada. It's obvious that he was called in to renovate that, and in fact, his speech was very much about the sovereignty of Canada, but also his own sovereignty in a way. No?
Yeah, yes, very much so. Yeah,
because the prime minister is the head of the government, but the monarch is King Charles, is the head of the state in Canada. People need to always have that clear in mind. I think that a lot of people forget that. And because Trump has demonstrated very much a respect, a very good relationship with the old queen that died, with Elizabeth II, then very much a respect for the monarchy. Let's not forget that he's partly Scottish. We're actually related with Trump. He has a aristocratic, even royal lineage. So that means that he has a certain. That's why Charles at one point even offered the entrance, which is unheard of the United States in the Commonwealth, which I think is quite incredible. But Canada, as a constitutional monarchy, has in a way embraced again the king due to the fact that yes, the dangers of Trump and the threats of annexation has made this
even for Trump in the U.S. Is there still something to be said, as we clearly see here in Canada, as sort of like, kiss the ring?
I think that though Trump, even with the arrival of the king there and with this speech, he hasn't really backed down on the idea. So he hasn't backed down on the idea.
Yeah, and I would agree. Okay. I certainly want to get into a lot of like what you've written about.
One thing is for sure, you have to understand that we are really facing an unprecedented situation in the world.
That's kind of what I wanted to jump into. Like, there's so many things happening: Russia, Israel, Palestine.
In all this, they offer that Canada will be better off with us because they will be part of the Golden Dome. Now, that is a proposal that might seem, not very relevant.
And sort of this new fight between Canada and America is a different one as well, too. I wanted to touch on that. But my gosh, you know what? Before we get into that, if it's okay with you, I really wanted to just get everything that you can throw, everything that you have to offer, because I couldn't ever think of anybody better to try to have on to talk about this one important subject: the new Pope.
New Pope.
But what it means to you, not what it means to the world, what it means to you. Because I don't want to hear what it means. I certainly want to understand what it means to the world, through your mind, I guess, in a sense. But I just really want to hear what it means to you. The new Pope, the whole cycle, everything that just transpired in the last month.
Well, I was supposed to be there for Easter. I will actually probably have been there for the whole thing if the Italian police didn't go and annoy my mother with an interrogation and threatened me. And that's why, like I said earlier, I'm now asking the American ambassador to intervene in Italy, because it's a threat to me, my family, which it's unheard of, and it's it's a matter concerning the freedom of speech. The police admitted to my mother that there was regarding the work that they did and the defamatory laws, which, like I said earlier, they are criminal in Italy, and so they will threaten you with prison, not only with a fine. And for that reason, also people need to understand the figure of the president or the Pope in Italy are almost untouchable at the public level, because the journalists get immediately sued and silenced. So to actually not be there was, for me, I mean, I was hoping to be there. And in a way, I also was working on this book, and I wanted this book to be out before the Pope, the Pope Francis died. But I actually ended up finishing this book after his death, the day after. And so it gave also the possibility of finally
Were you starting to work on the book knowing that this was coming?
This many months ago, when I saw the declining health of the Pope, and of course, when before they brought this Pope inside the hospital in February, same things came to light that demanded urgency. So I needed to get this book as soon as possible down.
Yeah, I thought so. There we go. Yeah, okay. Okay.
And,
sorry.
And eventually, what I said in this book still stands as. I mean, it is a bestseller because people are finding in this book things they couldn't find anywhere else. Because in the last 25 years, there's not been one single book in the English language denouncing the Jesuits. And every single academic I know will never touch this subject because they are afraid they control the universities, either being the Jesuit ones like Georgetown or Fordham, but also the non-Jesuit universities. Here in California, every single educational institute of all kinds is controlled by the Jesuits in one way or another. And the same is in Canada. I mean, when Justin Trudeau went and visited the Pope Francis, he brought the history of the Jesuits in Canada as a gift to this Pope. But the infamous history of the Catholic Church in Canada is not really the best. I mean, especially concerning the Native Americans and the way they were treated and things.
Well, you've got a bit of a pickup there recently, because as much as Canada is super woke and has no idea how to try to scramble itself out of entrenched dogmatic liberalism, the whole there's massive graves that were all left by the Catholics or whatever like that failed. There isn't any. We didn't find any massive graves of all, the residential school, this, that, and the other thing. It didn't happen. And so...
well, we don't know what that happened, because I tell you, the Catholic Church is very good at hiding things. So
that's an interesting take. That's a very interesting take. So... even though there is a lot of Canadian, even Indigenous, that can go look back at their history and say, no, there were some lies there, and it wasn't all bad, and hey, we're not what it's meant to be looked at like. We're not the survivors of what the perspective is like from the mainstream. You are still going to go say that I guess that it would be understandable, of course, that the Catholic Church did, of course, and but again, you're right, because we do know this to be true. Yeah, did the Catholic Church brutalize people in that time? Yeah, it did. But we didn't find the mass graves, not the mass graves of children. Like, that didn't happen.
Yes. Let's not forget, though, that there has been clergy abuse regarding of the mass graves. That's why I didn't mention mass graves. I mentioned, though, the criticism, which is towards the compensation that, of course, should be given to all sexual abuse victims all over Canada. Because there has been, children molested for decades in all over Canada. So the sexual abuses
that still happens to this day under the Canadian government.
Yes, I mean, it happens in Manitoba, it happens in it happens in New Brunswick, it happens in Alberta, it happens everywhere, and that is why
by the hands of what's called CFS, Child Family Services.
I would say that regardless. So I mean, there is a lot of angry Catholics that might be angry for all the abuse that happened in places like, northern Quebec or other places. I mean, I'm talking about serious abuse that, and so, and a lot of victims. I mean, for example, a bunch of victims that have filed lawsuits and complaints. So when the Pope and I'm talking about a Pope who was actually in the hospital, technically speaking, he actually accepted from the hospital the resignation of a bishop from Canada who was been named in a class action suit there. So, I mean, that happened when the Pope was actually in hospital, and people didn't know if he would come out of the hospital. In the end, you see, the Pope of the last few months was a little bit like Joe Biden for the last 4 years of the presidency. I mean, when
you're very much missing in
with
action.
the auto pen, auto pen,
Yes.
auto pen, auto pen. But when it comes to the Pope, you have also a seal which is in your ring, which is broken after you die. Now, very indicative the fact that it wasn't destroyed immediately in the 24, 48 hours after his death. It was kept, that seal, and the ring, until the new Pope was elected almost. So we are talking about a breach of a tradition that's very important, because it means that even after the death of the Pope, they will have been sealing with the ring documents that, so when in Canada, the Pope accepted this resignation of this bishop in Canada, that was a very big deal, because in that moment of time, the Pope was preparing the future of the church. He was preparing for this new Pope. We didn't really know, I myself ignored, everybody ignores what the Jesuits behind the scenes and the Pope, who was the first Jesuit Pope, were actually preparing for us. I knew that he would have been black, but in reality, yes, this Pope has actually black roots from Haiti, from New Orleans, but he has also French roots. In fact, he has the Fior d'Ali as a symbol, which, as you know, this is a very important symbol for New Orleans, but also for France. He has French Prevost, French blood. So the Augustinian order is a specific and particular order which has worked hand in hand with the Jesuits, especially in South and Central America. So he had he was very covert in the way that he came in, because even the U.S. Bishop Conference didn't really know him because of his missionary role. He never really spent time here in the United States. So even the most expert U.S. bishops, like cardinals like Cardinal Dolan, were surprised and shocked by this decision but they had to accept it, because the Jesuits had already prepared everything. So it was really short, let's say 1 day, just to make a scene. But the Pope was basically already decided the moment the other one died. And in fact, this Pope had been prepared since 2023. And on the 6th of February, just a few days before this Pope went into the hospital, this current Pope Leo XIV was promoted to Cardinal Bishop. So a further promotion in order to... So the abuses of indigenous children in Canada are a reality and a truth that we cannot ignore. The Canadian, I think the Canadian Conference of Bishops has admitted that they were directly involved with their schools in Canada, which have then forced, all kinds of terrible experiences on these indigenous children. So what is your take on that? Because here we're talking about, you say there were no burial sites, but the Vatican doesn't admit things without having evidence. And they admitted 1,000 burial sites.
That's okay. That is a that would be a comment that I certainly wasn't expecting tonight, but I totally understand. And I mean, yeah, Well, no. And hold on, let me back that up. I should not say that I totally understand. In fact, I very much don't understand it.
Well, I mean, nobody should
That was a very.
understand them.
I mean, I can understand you having the comment, but I shouldn't say it even like that because I don't understand the comment necessarily, so I can't say it like that. I find it very intriguing. I find it very intriguing, and it's not like I can argue the point because I mean, well, I understand.
Let's not forget one thing, Todd, that not only in Canada things like this happen. They happen in South America. They happen all over the United States, where we can say that the Jesuits played a key role even against the Native American Indians here in the United States. In many instances, even to recently, the Jesuits took over a holy mountain like Mount Graham to build up a astronomical center with the Lucifer telescope, now known as Lucy. And I explain in this book why the Jesuits are the leaders in the astronomical sector, which brings us to this guy who is Guy Consolmagno, who is the astronomer currently of the Vatican. And he's a Jesuit because the Jesuits are in charge of the astronomical sector, but they're also in charge of the magic, of the esoteric, of the knowledge that comes from those Native Americans that transmitted to them their points of contact with the world above, their knowledge of other other beings. Let's say, let's call them other beings from other worlds, and so the fact that of course they might be a different position, but let's remember that Pope Francis expressed his pain on the discovery of at least 215 children in Canada. Now, why admitting it now? Because now it's no longer, there is no longer that relation which
there's several generations down the line, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And because, of course, the new woke policies that the Jesuits themselves want to implement,
they can hide their crimes inside that.
They will kind of like, it will not, I mean, I make an example. Here in America, the first thing they did, like when they wanted to push this whole thing of the reparations for the descendants of slaves, the Jesuits started this trend by wanting to apologize publicly because they owned slaves in Georgetown. And so they started this whole thing of launching this new trend of the reparations.
Because it's always, don't look here. Don't look here.
Well, the reparations, but no, let me tell you one thing, reparations, but the Vatican tends always to not give any money. I mean, they talk very nice words, even in regards to the victims of pedophilia, but then they end up leaving the single states with having to give back the money to the victims. I mean, it's just like the way that the Vatican operates. It's of course in their interest, which is always money. And let's not forget that if this Pope was chosen, he was chosen because the biggest finances of the church, of the cash of St. Peter Pence is the United States of America.
Yeah, and it's hyper hypocritical. Like, it's just like they are the worst hypocrites imaginable. It would seem.
Yeah, absolutely.
We see this all over the place. I mean, I just recently ran into a story with people that I know here in Winnipeg, where like a youth group leader was the number one person involved in pedophilia and all the kinds of things that he was teaching the children in his youth group to not do. Right, like it was 100%. That's why he wanted to be there. There's this weird thing about human psychology that we still, don't really. It's hard, right? To go pick up on that, that Jeffrey Dahmer, right? Which is going to look like the best, slickest. I don't get it. We're fooled by it all the time, just all the time. The one who, of course, no way, not that guy. That's the guy. The one who wants to be in charge of the youth group because he just came out of nowhere. Yeah. Or whatever like that, or maybe he's got a bit of a checkered past, but he's cleaned himself up and now he's the best. Yeah, watch that boy closely. Watch that boy very closely. There's a good chance he's a.
I remember there was in 2024, so only last year, there was a priest accused of abusing Inuit children in Canada. And of course, this clergyman who was dubbed the devil priest, he was called Joan Rivoire. He was a member of the missionary of the Oblates of Mary Immaculate. And of course, we are talking about events that happened a long time ago, maybe 1960s, 70s. He then returned to France, I think in the 90s, early 90s. And of course, now the fact that time passes by, it makes it more and more difficult then, because there is less and less witness, less and less will to come out and, make such accusations. So we can say that there is always been in a lot of injustice surrounding all these cases, and that's why, for example, when this Pope was still a cardinal, and because of his own cover-ups, the SNAP, which is the organization which takes care of the victims of child abuse within the priest within the Catholic Church, had denounced this cardinal and actually said that you shouldn't make him an eligible cardinal. He is not to be elected. But that happened, So I think that today people are mature enough to understand all this. And what I can notice from this Pope, from at least the first, he's just been elected, but I noticed that he seems to want to stay a little bit away from the politics, not attacking like Pope Francis did continuously, because of course they want to bring back certain people who left the church, especially in places like the United States. There has been, though, confirmation from actions on the ground that nothing really has changed. Actually, things are even getting worse with the arrival of this Pope. Like, for example, the traditional Latin Mass, it seems to already be, a victim. The Pope had made some restrictions. Now it seems that the bishops are implementing them on a faster pace. Then you have, on top of that, the actual garments of this Pope. The garments are made by an homosexual who is openly homosexual and has his own line of perfumes that are completely flamboyant.
Oh, and that Pope just came in just before Pride Month. So.
No, but it's been like this since Ratzinger. You will expect.
Oh, okay.
You will expect with this Augustinian Pope some change, maybe some.
Same thing.
Going back to the traditional garments and the guys, in the old school people who are near the Vatican. I know a lot of them who have their own shops for the clergy. Instead, no, he is continuing to use this flamboyant homosexual guy who has nothing to do, I think, with the Catholic faith. So I think that there is already some contradictions. There is also a visible, though, in this book I explained. This will be...
Okay, well, hold on. This is a perfect segue, because this is what I was just about to do. Leo, because everything needs to be bigger about what you're about to do right now. I want to put you up on screen by yourself. I'll be right here.
Okay.
Of course, but you go do. I want to hear the whole breakdown, everything about this book. So you're on screen by yourself, so the whole audience can see exactly what this book looks like. We're going to order it, the whole deal. Everybody, if you're just sitting there in your living rooms right now, come on, give it up. Round of applause, everybody. One of the coolest and best and most amazing historians, podcasters, authors, and the people. Somebody. Imagine this. This guy has been speaking out about this for so long. And you're one of the only Canadian audiences that get to hear him strictly on a Canadian platform. Everybody, by the way, once again, our pleasure, always our pleasure. The wonderful Leo
Thank you so much. Now, this is the last installment of my Illuminati, or my Confessions of an Illuminati, Volume 12. You can read it on its own, and then later on decide to read the other books. But the various installments were built like from the base going all the way to the top, where you will find the all-seeing eye. There, where of course you have the Black Pope, the infamous Superior General of the Jesuits, who is the real ruler of all the Luciferian court. In fact, it's entitled History, Secret Societies, and the Politics of the Jesuit New World Order and the Luciferian Court. Now, when I talk about Luciferian Court, I talk about the think tanks like World Economic Forum, Club of Rome, Bilderberg, which have a lot to do with Canada. So definitely that's a topic of interest, but also their direct relationship with Freemasonry, with the Illuminati. And I'm not speculating here. I'm actually giving historic indications, documentations, testimony, even firsthand, but also from other sources to make it, of course, even more believable, because this is, like you said, it's a work of an historian, and he wants to debunk the classic way of the conspiracy theories that sometimes speculate way too much when there's no need to speculate. For almost 500 years, since their foundation in 1540, they have been a very important part of the worldwide power structure. And they have been very powerful also along with the empires that they work with. So, you know, their foundation actually was in Montmartre in Paris in 1534. And when you're talking about Canada, you're talking about the direct legacy of France. But at the same time, even for the United States, there is a connection at the very foundations in 1776 with the Jesuit order. So all this, of course, is expressed in volume 12 of my Confessions, which is absolutely not a dull history lesson, but is rather also a confrontation also with the present, because if you don't know the past, you will not be able to know the present, and definitely you'll not be able to identify the future. And I must say that in this book you will find also Donald J. Trump himself, his own experience with the Jesuits. So just to make it clear, we are very honest and very transparent also about that. And it's not going to be like a disappointment for those who believe in Donald J. Trump, because Trump renounced to joining the actual secret societies on campus when he was studying with the Jesuits for a couple of years in Fordham. Though I myself studied with the Jesuits, and so I don't know if I have here maybe an image that I can show you something, but I can tell you that the experience that you might have when you study with the Jesuits, this was me. Of course, people will not recognize me. I had a lot more hair, but it is an experience that will help you later in life if you don't get brainwashed by them, if you don't get bought out by the system that is constructed around you. Today, there was a friend of mine I was talking with from LA who came to visit me, and he was picking up a copy of this book and was telling me, but how did they build up this power structure around us? And I said that it was very much about the education. You see, when they picked up in the 16th century and they founded this order, they had to fill up the vacuum made by the Knights Templars, who had been persecuted and eliminated from the hierarchical, from the church structure, because, as you know, the Templars were no longer recognized by the Pope, and the last Grand Master was burnt at the stake in Paris, Jacques de Molay. But after that, the survivors of the Knights Templars, of course, went on to build up the very early stages of Freemasonry, the banking system, which they have elaborated. So the Jesuits couldn't really launch the banking system because it was already a genie that came out of the box. But their idea was to exploit education, which is something they have done since then. I mean, the archives that.
Well, I was going to say, it's just like the royal family had to do, right? With first starting, I think, kind of with Diana, right? They had to go outside the family tree. Eventually, things start to not go so well, and you got to start to
I think
branch
that
out.
the very important to understand that the Jesuits were born right at the time in which Elizabeth I and the Reformation was in full swing, with the Church of England making their first moves. So the moment in which the Catholic Church wanted to react, they needed a group of soldiers, and the Jesuits were those soldiers. So even in Canada, they had a very important role. Now, there was a moment in which the Jesuits were suppressed by the Vatican. Even in Canada, they were not allowed to make a new recluse. In fact, at that point, the last Jesuit died in Canada in the year 1800. But soon after, 14 years, in 1814, the Jesuits came back even stronger than ever when they were reaccepted by the Catholic Church. And of course, they went back to Canada because Canada was very important in their structure.
Why is that?
Because you see, Canada, the history of Canada,
because we're the ones who failed at leaving.
Like we said, the Jesuit order moved with the Catholic empires. So, and the Catholic
America fought back, Tea Party, blah blah blah, whatever,
Yeah, but Canada didn't. Canada didn't.
1776, right?
Yeah, but Canada didn't.
Yeah, exactly. So Canada doesn't have a 1776.
Okay, so let's say the Jesuits.
So does that mean we get to they just we're just an open door?
The Jesuits, for example, like you said, during the suppression, faced extinction in Canada, but they didn't face extinction in America, where they simply there was a minority of Catholics, and where the first Catholic bishop was actually a Jesuit, but also two of the founding fathers were of the same family, the Carroll family, and even the Capitol building was donated by a guy from the Carroll family, so one of the founding fathers who was studying and was working with the Jesuits, because it was actually Maryland was known as Rome.
At that point, you're kind of making it seem like, of course, like the two histories of both countries, are that much similar, but we're very different now.
Very different, because for the moment we have Donald J. Trump. If there was, for example, Kamala Harris, we would be on the same pace.
Okay, wow. Okay. Well, no. There was still vast.
No. Let me tell you, if it was
50 years ago.
Listen.
Because we even have a different. Hold on.
If there was the Democrats in the White House, you will have Mexico and Canada, open borders, everything open. There will be no difference. We
even have a different structure of government, because Canada is very different from the U.S., well beyond current day.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for them. They wanted to just have, they wanted to have power when they had a Catholic president, the second in history with Joe Biden. They wanted to keep their stronghold, so they could have their immigration policies and continuing to fill up of Catholics from South and Central America, this country, and not only this country, because then that inevitably a lot of those immigrants end up also in Canada. So you are pushing more Catholics. So you are transforming the very essence of the whole land.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, for example, in Montreal, you have the Jesuit archives, and those archives are of great importance for the Jesuits. They know exactly what kind of resources Canada has. They know exactly what kind of investment.
Right, there we go. So what you're leading towards is sort of like Canada being sort of protected in this matter for certain reasons.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, but there's always reasons that have eventually end up always having some kind of purpose. I mean, when you are talking about the Justin Trudeau show with the Jesuits and the Pope and saying sorry, it's all because in the end it's about bringing then the acceptance of more woke policy, more progressive policy, and more of those policies that are actually originally coming from the Jesuits. So yes, you will have the great hypocrisy of a guy like Justin Trudeau who says, we are sorry, you have to, sorry, we ask for the indigenous people, you need to say sorry to them, blah, 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 and all that BS. But in reality, then it was all because of the interest in showing that they are always the best. You see, ethically and morally, they always want to appear like they are the best. When we go back in history, we know that that's not the case, that they were the worst, that they did things that were out of this world, the popes included. I mean, imagine the papacy of 500 years ago with the Borgias and the perversion and the Pope who will end up sleeping with the daughter or whatever, and all kinds of perversion that during the centuries the Vatican had popes that were so perverse that they were just there because they were maybe member of a specific of a family of the black aristocracy, as is known, the aristocracy close to the Vatican, and so that's how things worked out. But the structure of the Vatican for 2,000 years was built on the lie that there was a supremacy of a pope over all the other bishops, because that pope was designed by Peter to then the others. Now, that is what I try to explain in this book. I try to explain that this pope that we have now is no longer a pope like the previous one.
Hold on, because you're getting back into the current Pope situation, which I really want to be a big part of this broadcast, and that's you're the best to do it. I'm gonna, again, just to give you a heads up, I'm gonna put you back on screen by yourself.
Well, like I said, this Pope is being designed, crafted, and molded by the past Pope, but this Pope knows very well that his role has to be less of a Pope and more of a bishop. In fact, in less than, in 11 days, he has invited and he has talked with Bartolomeo I, the ecumenical patriarch in charge of the most influential side of the Orthodox Church, because they need to get them all together. Now, there is a lot of people out there who are asking me, Leo, do you have evidence that Pope Bartolomeo I is a Freemason, or that this and that is a Freemason? Now, guys, I have evidence, okay? Evidence because I know the people involved. I was in lodges with them, and they were very close. They are still, some of them, with Bartolomeo I. So he has always been surrounded by all these Freemasons, but also he's been an asset of NATO, Bartolomeo I. So there is this religious war at the moment, also with Russia and the Patriarchate of Moscow. And I see a lot of people who have abandoned the Catholic Church in recent years to go to these Orthodox churches, hoping that there was something different. They will find something different. But in the end, this new Pope that we're seeing, Leo XIV, is actually in charge of reuniting all these churches. And the first speech he did, he said, we have to unify all the churches. So it doesn't matter if you're Orthodox, if you're Evangelist, Methodist, whatever, if you're Buddhist, you will come under the one world religion.
You just mentioned Moscow. That's interesting.
Yeah, Moscow, because Moscow is the rebel in this one world government and one world religion structure.
Break that down. Now, okay, break that down. What is that?
Well, if you want to break it down in a very simple and brief way for your viewers, I have discussed this in essence in my past books, especially in volume 7, where I define how the Masons and the Jesuits are creating this one world religion, and how Moscow is a critical element in this creation. If they don't have Moscow, they don't have the complete reunification of the Orthodox churches. Now, this is a schism, the one with the Orthodox Church, that goes back almost 1,000 years. And it was the first schism that Rome had to fight. And now, in the year 2025, it seems like all these elements that the Catholic Church lost along the way are coming back together. That's why this Pope is an Augustinian, just as Martin Luther was an Augustinian. And it's almost like
hold on, explain that term.
Augustinian is a part of a group of, it's a religious order of monks, of friars, very much dedicated to education, a little bit like the Jesuits, but not so spread, let's say, but still very influential. They have a university here in the United States, which is one of the most influential universities, called Villanova University, and that's where this Pope actually went. And so the way that how you say, this order which this new Pope is part of makes their living is with education, which, like I said, is very influential. It's very important. They are the ones who decide the actual what they have to accept within the scientific realm, the historical realm. They write the narrative. If we are reading today's books, we are reading what they want us to read. Let's not forget that. I mean, these professors that we have in the universities, often they have to make choices. And the only Augustinian Catholic university in the nation, Villanova, has prepared a lot of the most celebrated. I mean, Jill Biden, and this maybe people don't know, but Jill Biden studied with the Augustinians at Villanova University. Just to give you a name. And I think that people who are watching me now, they will suddenly have like, wow, now everything makes sense. Who was controlling the White House for 4 years? Jill Biden and Hunter Biden. And who and where did Jill Biden go to school? In Villanova University. I mean, it kind of makes sense. You have also other celebrated alumni of this university. You have even the ex-president of the Stanford University, John Hesse, who was part of it. But Villanova is generally considered one of the most prestigious universities in the United States. It's the highest, I think, the highly ranked nationally, and has a strong reputation in the Philadelphia area. And for that reason, I think it's the 58th national university in the US. Many of those universities are also Jesuits, who are even higher ranking. But this is very important because, I repeat, who has control is the Order of St. Augustine. And it was founded in 1842 and named after St. Thomas of Villanova, and who was a Spanish friar of the same order as this Pope.
Yeah. The canon is regular.
Yes, and so the way that this Pope is working his way through is, of course, giving the opportunity to the Augustinians, who had a guy like Martin Luther, to actually bring back the lost flock. It's almost like the Jesuits gave them a mission after 500 years of fighting the Reformation. They said, okay, we're going to give you the papacy, but you have to bring us back the lost flock. Because one of yours, Martin Luther, did this damage. Get it? That is the kind of, I know it's difficult, but once you have a clear understanding of the history, that's why it's important to have a clear understanding of the past, of the present, and then you can realize the future. When in the back of the book, I have these symbols. This red flag is the symbol that you find in the Mother Church of the Jesuits, and it's a flag that is obviously a communist symbol also, because the Jesuits themselves experimented communism in South America back in the days. That's where they actually experimented it before anybody else, before the Freemasons, before the Bolsheviks, before anybody else. The Jesuits were able to experiment with these natives in these missions. And those experiments that they created these areas, this in present day Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay. They established these missions, and it was a sort of socialist theocracy. And of course, in my book, I explain all the details about this experiment that later on, of course, inspired other experiments. I mean, the Illuminati themselves of Adam Weishaupt were themselves an experiment based on Jesuitism, and then later on inspired further experiments especially if we go and think about the very origin of communism. The first place where it was experimented was for a brief time in Paris, thanks to the Grand Lodge de France, the Commune of Paris. But that experiment was, of course, in a way helped also by the Jesuits. So they made a mess, like some people are saying here in the chat, in South America and in Central America. Let's not forget, because Central America, it's also filled with the Jesuits. I mean, today, if all these migrants arrive here in America, especially during the Biden administration, where they had a pass, because at that point they knew they could come through. Yes, but who was pushing them here? It was the Catholic NGOs. It was the Catholic NGOs, and many of them, of course, were controlled by the Jesuits. This Pope was working, as we know, for a long time in South America, and he was, of course, everybody who works in South America works under the Jesuit order. Everybody knows that. That's because you were asking me, is the Spanish, Portuguese empires.
Well, wouldn't that also imply sort of like the cartels as well, too, if you're talking like Mexico?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think that the cartels don't have anything to do with the Catholic Church, you must be joking. I mean, Mexico was a place where up until a few decades ago, you couldn't even become a Mexican if you were not a Catholic. So I'm talking about a place where, of course, you are a cartel boss, you give a few billions a year, a few millions a year,
to the Catholic Church.
And then he will forgive you, give you a blessing, and say, confess your sins. Amen.
I killed this many thousands of people this year.
No, but
you are forgiven.
Somebody here in the chat actually say, the cartels actually are run by cardinals. In a way, if we want to
look at that.
It's almost true. It's almost true.
Gosh, I never. Again, everybody, just a quick heads up. This is going to be the last time you ever see me online, I think.
I hope not.
I'm done tonight. By the way, I'm getting comments from YouTube. Leo, did you put this up on YouTube?
Yes. I'm broadcasting.
Oh my gosh! For the first time in many years, I'm back live on YouTube. Wow, amazing.
Yeah. I suggest you go back on YouTube, because YouTube now, I've always said, because now they don't censor shit. They don't censor as before.
They backed off. Yeah, right.
They backed off since the Trump administration, at least here in the United States. Then, of course, I don't know about other countries, but here in the United States, they have backed off, and it seems like.
Comment. Okay, everybody, in the comment section, do you want to see Winnipeg Alternative Media back on YouTube? Because I've never even considered it, but maybe I can. Maybe now's the time. Very cool. Very cool. Very different. I didn't expect that to be a part of the broadcast here, but all of a sudden, a lot of the comments are coming from YouTube, and I'm like, well, that's got to be Leo. It certainly isn't me, but I love it.
During the pandemic, during the Biden administration, I had 17 channels removed.
Oh, yeah.
No, but I insisted, and immediately I noticed after the elections, a few of my channels, they were giving me back my channels, resurrecting channels they didn't have for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
They literally out of thin air. And they actually, send me this email saying, your channel is back. I mean, I was kind of surprised, but that's the way things work, because now things have really changed. And remember what has happened with Marco Rubio and this thing about global censorship, which he has outlined a few days ago, which I mentioned earlier in the show. It's very important, because you see, YouTube, Facebook, every single social platform that is created in the United States is, in theory, at least for Rubio, protected by the First Amendment and should operate without fear of retaliation or censorship. And that's why in the future we will see some changes. Like, for example, they threaten $1 billion fine for X in Europe of Elon Musk. That will have to disappear. Otherwise, the current administration will, make a direct action. The same for Rumble. It's been banned in France. You can't see Rumble in France.
And we are live on Rumble right now.
And we are live on Rumble, but people in France can only see us, for example, on Facebook or YouTube, because they're not allowed to go Rumble. I have a lot of friends who, when I was broadcasting only on Rumble, couldn't follow me from certain countries. So I had to, in a way, maintain my presence, and it wasn't easy. At one point, I resorted to an expedient, which was to broadcast only half of the show on YouTube, where I will not say everything, and then invite the people on the other side and say and spill the beans. So that was kind of an expedient that worked relatively well. I thank you so much for having me on. I hope we can do another show. Maybe let's not wait too long.
Oh my gosh, it was. I mean, of course, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on right now. There is so much more to talk about, and
give me a last question.
It was a wonderful. I will. Don't worry. I got one. I got more than one. I got more than one, man. My gosh.
Well, we have to be a little bit synthetic because I have very little time at disposal, unfortunately.
I know. That's okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's do it right now, real quick.
I know that we have 4 minutes here. The countdown is starting. Go for it.
The countdown is starting. Okay. Well, then hold on. Okay. Well, no. I mean, okay. First off, I want to go ask. I'm going to squeeze a couple things in here real quick. Okay, what do you think the future is between Canadian-American relations? Do you really, how much do you think Trump is gaming Canada, or trolling and so on and so forth? What do you think the real honesty of those relations really are?
I mean, one thing is the trolling, one thing is the effective relations. And we know that Canada and America are so interdependent for many things, which makes it very difficult at the moment. I mean, Trump wants to bring everything back here in the United States. And of course, so that will make it more and more difficult for Canada. But at the same time, there is still some things that America is not ready to produce that might still have the participation of Canada. So we have to see in the long run how this tariff thing is going to unfold, especially when it comes to China, because then China has a completely different relation with Canada, but is having also a big problem with the United States. And China seems to be spying on us through Cuba, seems to be helping the Russia. Now that is the big problem. I mean, we are probably facing a nuclear war of some kind, not a nuclear war in the traditional sense with missiles shot at both ends, but definitely it's possible that Putin might even use a small nuke just to start in Ukraine, at least start to because the attack that was done in this Trojan way with these drones was definitely they are very angry. The Russians at the moment, I spoke with people in Moscow, they're furious. The only thing that could eventually taint the beast, if you want to call him that way.
And I will admit, I maybe should have made that a bit of a bigger part of the broadcast, like maybe even a part of the
to make it synthetic.
But it's kind of sort of breaking news I didn't have a really good read on. So yeah, please.
No, but I think that it's important to say that at the moment, from the Russian perspective, rather than launching nukes and going into complete Armageddon mode, I think that probably they will invade the rest of Ukraine in a short time, and Zelensky will be not only defeated, but probably will be hanged upside down and found in some ditch. But after that,
do you expect a reaction from China or elsewhere?
No, China is working along with Russia. So, I mean, they are actually helping Russia rebuild, especially now they have lost 40% of their air force capabilities, including important aircrafts that was important for the nuclear. Because what has happened...
That's kind of what I meant by reaction.
The thing that people haven't not understood very well is that some of these nukes that are called... in Italy we call nucleari da campo, they get actually launched in the old way, like Hiroshima Nagasaki kind of way, and they have a modality that is different from the hypersonic modality or the other modality. Anyway, I think that there will be definitely a reaction from Russia, because Putin can't lose his face in front of his people, who are asking this time, for the first time in years, actually, since the very beginning of the war. There has never been all of Russia behind Putin asking him for nuclear retaliation. So let's see what's going to happen. Let's pray that, of course, nothing terrible occurs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, I got one other than. Here's my last one. And of course, this is something that I want to make sure to start the conversation on, maybe when I have you back again on next, which I will hope
Okay.
within the next, a handful of weeks to a month or so, which is, of course, how everything that we just touched on, you being a main, return guest for many years, but again, back on the big news cycle in independent media in the biggest way on InfoWars and such. The importance of the independent media, what real online and offline censorship is really doing, where it's going, that whole world. I want to hear that right from your
Well, I mean, just like I said earlier, what Rubio has done is very important for us now. As Americans, but then also it's going to influence, I hope, positively both Canada and Europe and other countries. Like, for example, only today, Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, has released one of the most famous YouTubers that was arrested, and people arrested for hate speech are common both in Great Britain but also in Germany. But now that Chancellor Merz is visiting Donald J. Trump, they actually have freed Shlomo, this powerful, influential YouTuber, and so that demonstrates that they are pretty scared of facing Trump with other censorship. So I hope that, in a way, the fact that Trump stays very firm in his position with Rubio in regards to the censorship and the freedom of speech in platforms that are American, like YouTube, Facebook, and so on, guarantees somehow the continuation of the independent media. So that is, of course, something that we need to hope for. And I think that Marco Rubio has done an excellent move by making this declaration on the 28th of May. So I think that sums it all. I have to go now because, unfortunately, I have a previous thing I have to attend. Thank you so much for Winnipeg media, in the independent media, and for, of course, having me on, and also able to promote my book that is a bestseller currently, and I hope it becomes also a bestseller in Canada, because people in Canada really need to read this book even more than other countries due to their long history with the Jesuits. So God bless you all and take care.
Leo, thank you so much for being with us here tonight. We will have you back on again as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Take care. God bless.
Ciao, Dodd.
Well, there we go, everybody. Another wonderful episode of The Prairie Truth, including, an international star right there, I would say. Somebody's been doing it a very long time, and we're going to have him back again real soon. I want to thank the entire wonderful audience for being with us here tonight, and all the wonderful comments and everything. Share this around. Thanks to everybody on YouTube. My gosh, it's making me think maybe go back onto YouTube. It's been a while. I'd give it another shot. Sure, why not? Thank you, everybody. All right. Well, you know what? That about does it here. I'll go a quick little bit of shop cleaning here, of course, to support the broadcast and to have more broadcasts like this. And oh gosh, so much more that we're working on. eTransferToWinnipegAllMedia@gmail.com. It's a simple eTransferToWinnipegAllMedia@gmail.com. You can go find us on Telegram at t.me/whamchat. If you're watching us on just Facebook right now or some garbage like that, well, please come on, shape up. You can find us on Rumble, the big one, WPG Alt Media. And you can find us on X and on Instagram as well too. Both of it's all really the same. It's all the same at WPG Alt Media or WPG Alt Media. That's where you find us everywhere. anywhere. WPG Media, WPG ALT Media, or at WPG ALT Media. You can email us all your questions, concerns, love letters, insults, nudes, all the rest at WPGLmedia, protonmail.com. And yeah, that's it. That's it, everybody. Good night. Tom Matugo signing off here for Winnipeg Alternative Media. We're going to be back with a lot more in just the next few days. It's going to be a busy week here, everybody, so stay tuned. Let's see. What's the right way to close this one off? Oh, well, yeah. Good night, everybody.
Inside old heads, sharing local knowledge, challenging the norm, building up a community, weathering every storm. Yeah, Winnipeg Alternative, a flickering light, cutting through the darkness, searching for what's right. On the prairies wide, the wind carries the seed of a truth that's growing, a different kind of creed. So listen closely to the voices in the night, for the prairie truth is rising, baked in a different light. A flicker in the darkness, a whisper in the breeze. Winnipeg Alternative, planting truth among the trees. Yeah, that's the prairie truth. That's a story for you and me.